Welcome to Hollywood Stuntmakers. On this episode, Hollywood goes to sea. On this episode of Hollywood Stuntmakers, we'll explore the challenges of underwater filmmaking. We'll find out how visual effects experts can simulate an underwater environment. Roger that. Document as much as you can, please. We'll go behind the scenes of the movie Patriot Games and talk to producer Mace Neufeld about the difficulties associated with shooting action sequences at sea. And we'll find out how aquatic battles are staged and shot. All this and more on Hollywood Stuntmakers. Filmgoers with a thirst for adventure have always loved movies about the sea, but making movies in, around, or underwater is seldom smooth sailing. By far, the greatest accomplishment in underwater movie making is James Cameron's 1989 film, The Abyss. Movie audiences had gone beneath the surface of the water before, but never like this. Most of the film was shot underwater, and special gear had to be developed so that Cameron could direct as many as 150 submerged crew members.
Go to the right, swing to the right.
Cinematographer Mikhail Solomon discusses the many challenges presented by this ambitious film.
When Jim Cameron first approached me about The Abyss and gave me the script to read, I said, I really want to be part of this. This is fantastic, but how are we going to pull it off? Every day on the set was a new experience. Every day we had to make new inventions. We had maybe 5 normal movie shots in that movie. I think we had one day where we said, this is just like shooting a normal movie. Every day had its challenges, its disasters and technical problems. They had scouted locations around the States and found an old abandoned nuclear reactor. It wasn't old, it was just never finished, but the whole outer shell was finished. I think it was about 250 feet in diameter.
And since the structure was built to withstand severe pressure in the case of a nuclear emergency, Cameron and his crew realized they could modify the power plant to fit their needs. After waterproofing its interior, a 6-story oil rig was built inside the plant, which was then filled with water. This became the working environment for Cameron and his crew over the next 9 months. The grueling shooting schedule required most crew members to spend as many as 16 hours a day underwater. Fortunately, there were no serious mishaps, although director Cameron did have one close call. Mikhail Solomon explains.
Jim Cameron, who was in a helmet, he ran out of air. And the way he approached it was, we heard his voice drone over this thing 12 hours, 14 hours every day, so nobody, and he said, he was going on about directing something, I said, put me over there, and then he said, I'm out of air, and then he kept going, and nobody really picked up on it, and then he said again, I'm out of air, and then they took him up, and they realized he was totally out of air, and it happened to us all, but when you were in scuba gear, it was much easier to just do this, and somebody would come over and you would buddy breathe and then go up to the surface. But for him, it was a little more precarious because he couldn't do that, and he had this big helmet on and no air. So that was a little scary. For this 9-month period we worked around these dangerous sets, we never had any problems, really.
This is how it all began. This 1955 film, simply titled Underwater, starred Jane Russell and introduced audiences to a brand new scientific advancement called scuba diving. Although these shots seem primitive by today's standards, underwater opened up a new world to filmmakers everywhere. There are times, however, when a director would rather simulate an underwater atmosphere than actually shoot beneath the surface.
Copy that. Continuing forward.
This sequence from The Abyss appears to have been shot underwater. In reality, most of it was filmed on a bone-dry soundstage at DreamQuest Images, where visual effects specialists created many new effects techniques, including the first use of a process now called multiple motion control. The models used in The Abyss were also made here at DreamQuest Images. Cameron wanted the minis to be perfectly constructed. DreamQuest president Hoyt Yateman tells us about the difficulty in combining live action with the use of miniatures.
The Abyss, for me, is a very interesting film. It probably was the most difficult thing that I really ever had to do, and I think collectively for the company to do, because we were many times breaking new ground. Jim Cameron was going to cut our visual effects right up against his wet-for-wet photography in South Carolina, which was being shot in a real tank with real submersibles. So we were faced with actually imitating the look.
Magnetometer's twitching.
So what we did is we took footage that he had begun to shot, analyzed it as to what made it tick, and then went back and started doing some thinking as to how to create this in, I say, a dry-for-wet environment. Dry-for-wet photography is where you expose the miniatures in a smoke environment that gives the illusion that you're looking at something underwater. And what we did is we created a new type of motion control technique called the gantry, which is essentially an old idea where we take models and hang them from wires, but at the same time we upgraded it by the use of motion control, which has all the abilities of being able to repeat, multi-pass, and produce mats, which gave us the control that we needed in order to actually create the underwater look.
Also responsible for that seamless blend of live action and motion control footage was DreamQuest visual effects supervisor Matt Beck.
DreamQuest did a lot of testing to get the look right for the Abyss. It's the obligation of an effects company to make the shots fit into the matrix of the film. Otherwise, they're going to catapult the viewer out of his experience. So whatever is standard is established by the live action, we have to match. The idea of totally intercutting, live action footage shot underwater with miniatures shot on stage and seamless intercutting, that's it's a difficult problem, and it turned out well.
Making the actors appear as if they were actually inside the models presented another technical challenge for the visual effects specialists at DreamQuest.
In there is a projector, and you have Lindsay or One Night actually being projected onto a screen that hides inside there, and so you're seeing the interior with a real person inside it. And you say, well, that couldn't be a model, but it is. Okay, this is the projector. You can see it's about the size of a loaf of bread, but it holds full-frame 35mm film. We've got a little lens on the front here, and we focus it on a piece of RP material. You can see it advancing through the frame. With each frame of film, every axis moves, the ship moves a little bit, it rolls a little bit, and another frame of film advances. So as the ship rolls, for example, you might have the film of Lindsay roll in contrast to that, so it looks like she's stabilizing, and it looks like she's really reacting to the motion of the model. I think it may be analogous to like a dancer working in front of a mirror and saying, when I do this, that's what it looks like. It's the same kind of thing, except it ain't a mirror and you ain't the star. The model is.
On the Abyss, I think one of the most challenging things was a request to do blue screen underwater. When Lindsay first encounters the Manta ship, which is a crystalline glass vessel that the aliens send up from down below, and she's on the edge of literally the abyss, and she sees this glass ship come up in the shape of a manta ray, and she reaches up to touch the underbelly. We used plexiglass mirrors that were also placed underwater, reflecting the blue of the screen. So the actress would reach up and touch the underside of a mirror, putting her hand across the top. And then that would actually register with the glass crystalline ship that would be used in normal motion control photography, in dry for wet, and matted in behind it.
Over the side, men! Waters away!
The 1940 Errol Flynn adventure, The Seahawk, was one of the first films to feature a large-scale fight scene on the deck of a ship. Because of the unpredictable nature of shooting at sea, director Michael Curtiz elected to film this sequence on a soundstage. Life-size mock-ups of ships were constructed, then mounted on a platform that would simulate the motion of the sea. Hand-to-hand combat is tough enough, but try shooting a full-scale air-to-sea battle. In the 1970 release Tora, 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 scale models of American ships were used for long shots, then intercut with close-ups of real battleships. To find out more about the use of miniature ships in filmmaking, we spoke to visual effects designer Brick Price, whose company Wonderworks Incorporated built the Explorer ship for the movie The Abyss.
The Benthic Explorer for the Abyss was also a unique problem. It was one of the largest ocean-going models ever built, and the time frame was borderline absurd. There was so much going on. There were so many units working in different areas around the world that James Cameron was in South Carolina when we started work on that model, and we hadn't a clue what it was to look like. He had told us that he wanted it to be double-hulled. We knew that. We knew what it had to do. We had the script. But the script there were changes being made to the script on the fly the whole time. So at one point, we finally had to say, look, we have no plans. This is what we're going to do. The Benthic Explorer was meant to be a ship that was about 700 or 800 feet long, so the scale on it was somewhere around the 14th, 15th scale. It was literally working on a clock, and we had at one point we had 105 people working for us. So it was quite a task. It was like building a real ship. I mean, it was as large as a yacht. And from start to finish, it was done in 7 weeks. It was 43 feet long, approximately 15 feet wide, and it weighed about 7 tons. It was totally self-contained. It was able to move under its own power. It had a power generator to handle all the lights inside of it, and it had the special effects tricks on the surface. So once it left our shop and went to the location, it had to work perfectly. It was so well designed that it sat on the water. It didn't look like a real ship. When it was in there and everything was on it, it only drew about 3 inches in the water. So to control it, we had baffled compartments. And John Palmer, who is our general manager, has done a lot of yacht racing. He came up with a system whereby we could pump water from one chamber to another. We could fill it with sand, and we got it down to where it looked like a reasonable, realistic water line. And on some of the shots where you see the bow crashing into the waves, we actually pulled the front end down to where it was just above the surface of the water. But from the camera position, it looked like the bow was really dropping a lot with the wide-angle lenses stuff.
Miniatures like the Benthic Explorer can be quite expensive. The 1980 film Raise the Titanic featured this 55-foot scale model of the ill-fated vessel, constructed at a cost of over $5 million.
We're landing. Do you want to get out of the way?
This aircraft carrier from the film Hot Shots was created through the use of another popular visual effects tool, the matte painting. Here's DreamQuest Images' Matt Beck.
Well, you can see that this is a matte painting. You can see that little people in the planes and the helicopter. One of the tricks that we like to do is add motion inside the matte painting. So when we shot it, we had a little elevator that actually moved up and down here, and the little radar screen was turning. And then we rear projected real ocean that we went out and shot. And then in the middle here, from a tower, we shot a bunch of guys running in panic on a parking lot. And when we put the whole thing together, we fly toward the aircraft carrier, shaking all the time like a plane out of control, and we see people looking at us and then running for their lives because we're about to land right on top of them. And we come right in here, and this area here is all live action with real people. And so to the eye, it looks like a real aircraft carrier, and there never was a real aircraft carrier in the show. So it's kind of cool.
Run for your life!
Naturally, there's a high degree of danger in performing stunts underwater. Phil Adams knows all about that.
Check the lens for extraction.
The most challenging stunt in Ice Station Zebra was working in the conditions of frigid water and constantly knowing that you had to be always on the cold side, and it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, especially when you know that you're going to be trapped under a bomb that's got you penetrated and pushed to the bottom of the ship. There's a sequence in there that the bomb has trapped an individual underneath it, and I happen to be trapped underneath that bomb. I can remember being on air down there and thinking how it would really be to be trapped in this cold, frigid water. You wouldn't have much time to... You would pray that somebody would come down there and get you. The hazards of shooting in cold water is your body goes into shock. And so many times we have sequences to do over and over and over again, and in this instance we did. We had many sequences that we had to shoot time and time again. And this was the major portion of it. And a wetsuit we couldn't have on. It had to be authentic. You just couldn't be down there in a wetsuit because we were filming on top of the water as well as underwater at the same time. And this presented the major hardship for us because John Sturgis wanted that water to be ice cold, and certainly enough, it was ice cold. And that was the main hardship of that shoot, was to stay in control of your faculties without freezing to death under there. On ice stations, we had to have an abundance of men that were capable of doing underwater work. To not panic is to stay controlled, and you would stay as long as you could hold your breath. They would be shooting it.
This parking lot is where producer Mace Neufeld created the watery world for Patriot games. Once the cars are removed, the area is flooded with water and ready for action. Producer Mace Neufeld.
Water is a filmmaker's nightmare. The sea and the sky and the wind and the rain changes, you know, from hour to hour, and trying to match one day's shooting to the next, and it is very difficult. Worse than that, we called for water storm at night at sea. And so the question is, how do you light that, and how do you see it, and how do you do it safely?
Harrison Ford has performed in numerous action sequences, but never one like this from Mace Neufeld's 1992 release, Patriot Games. Ford prefers to do as much of his own stunt work as possible, but this time he was in a little deep.
Harrison Ford is a movie star with an incredible sense of action. In the tank at Paramount, we couldn't impede it, and it was murderous. The exhaustion factor begins to catch up, so that you can't spend too much time trying to do it over and over again. You have to try and get it right as quickly as possible because of the human factor.
As challenging as shooting at sea may be, there are times when no substitute will suffice. Here's David Grober of Motion Picture Marine to tell us about the high-tech equipment needed for shooting action sequences at sea.
What we have here is a gyrosphere. It comes from Preston Camera Systems. This system was originally developed for use in a helicopter. As you can see here, the lens will point out of this hole here, and this housing, which goes all the way around it, and the other part of it is back here, which will basically enclose this whole unit, basically protects the camera and the inside gyros and everything from the elements. The wind resistance is cut down and protects also from the vibration. This system here is probably one of the most advanced systems that there is for filming on the water. Again, using gyro systems that we have now, it makes everything much more stable. When we used to film years ago, I would say we basically would either hand hold or we would put the camera on a tripod. Previously, what we've used, and we still use also, is a Tyler gyro mount. And that mount basically is not able to have such a wide degree of motion as this, but the gyros in it basically operate in a similar manner, and they will keep the camera very level and the horizon very level when we're filming. The differences in the two mounts also is that the Tyler gyro will be secured directly to the deck. In this unit here, we have a structure here that actually will hang the unit the same way as it would normally hang from a helicopter. If we're going to be doing something like a high-speed boat chase, this type of a unit, the gyrosphere, will be a better unit to use simply because it's going to isolate the camera much more from the pounding of the boats, and it's also going to be able to compensate much quicker for the motion that we're going to have when we're running through these seas. When we're getting ready to film on the water, we'll, again, look at the storyboard. We'll determine the types of boats that we're going to be used for the various sequences. Some of the sequences we'll be doing will be high-speed race boats, in which case our camera boat is also going to be fairly fast. In other situations, if we're going to be shooting things that are going to be dead in the water, we'll want to make sure that we have a large boat that's fairly stable. Again, maneuverability is also real important. Whenever possible, I'll work with a vessel that's going to have twin-screw boats, so we have a lot of maneuverability with it. Actually, one of the boats we use quite often is this 31-foot Bertram Sportfisher here. It's got a large open aft space on it, and we use it quite a bit for filming.
I hope you've enjoyed our voyage behind the scenes of Hollywood at sea. Like the captain of any ship, a filmmaker has to plot a course, hire the best hands available, and try not to get in over his head.